Hello, and welcome to the Sunshine Sound Podcast with your host, Christine Matthias.
I mean, if you look at, like the satanic panic of the 80s and, when people were like, oh, does listening to, Judas Priest or Alice Cooper make people want to, join cults and this and that and whatever, like, I think it's, for, like, the way Jeff and I see it, it's like the opposite. It's like if you can address what within you is dark and hurting and maybe a little disturbed and put it out through art, it addresses something like really primal within you in a way that's like healthy and in a way that's healing.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 14 of the Sunshine Sound podcast. In this one, I interviewed Jeff and Candice from Blood Ponies. They are a dark post-punk band based in San Diego. Candice is on drums and Jeff is on vocals and guitar. But for a duo, they have a really huge sound, and that sound is driving and dark. So we chat about a lot of stuff, like the start of their band. They actually started off by playing a set as a Cure cover band at a Halloween show in 2015. But we also go into things like how they produce such a huge sound, how they rate their music, which sounds pretty intuitive, and why they're both drawn to kind of gruesome and mysterious things. Plus, we'll get a chance to listen to a couple of their tracks. Enjoy. So today in the studio, I have Jeff and Candice from the Blood Ponies. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for
having us.
Oh, sure. How you guys doing?
We're good.
Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of gloomy out right now, which we like. So that works for us.
It fits.
Sure.
It's our kind of day.
Yeah, I think I get that vibe from your look, your music. Mm-hmm. So how would you describe the Blood Ponies? Is it Blood Ponies or the Blood Ponies?
We just go by Blood Ponies.
Okay,
yeah, we don't use
that.
the Facebook.
But we're not like particular about it. If somebody says the Blood Ponies, that's fine. Yeah. I would describe us as kind of a heavy post-punk band. I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to say dark post-punk or like goth influenced post-punk.
Yeah. I think, we obviously like have a lot of pretty dark influences, bands like Joy Division or Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, that kind of thing. There have been a few times when we've kind of gotten paired with like these kind of campy, like surfy zombie bands, and it's like it's cool.
Basically,
but,
like rockabilly, like or psychobilly, really.
Sure. Which isn't really our thing. Like, not that we have anything against it, but it's just a different sound than what we do.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But I mean, I think, especially in San Diego, it's like you get billed with.
Yeah, well,
it's a small community.
Yeah, and especially for like darker sounding bands, there's not. I feel like San Diego right now has like a pretty good small group of bands that are doing darker music, which even a few years ago like wasn't necessarily the case, but it's still a really small group. So there's only like so many dark bands within San Diego that we really fit on a bill with, which we get, and it is what it is.
But the upside of that is we become good friends with all these bands.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. You wouldn't think, like, in San Diego, it's so sunny here, that there wouldn't be all this dark music. So that's
it's almost kind of a necessity in a way, because it's like, well, obviously we live somewhere that's so pleasant to be, but at a certain point you kind of there's sort of that craving to kind of be drawn toward the dark side.
Balance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's just all sunshine all the time, then I feel like that gets a little mind numbing. So you gotta have the dark to balance out the light.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Are you guys from San Diego?
More or less. I grew up in North County, and came down here for college. So I've been living in San Diego proper for about 18 years.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and I also went to high school in North County, and then I left and ended up coming back after college, and have been here now for like 15 years. So I feel like, I mean, I moved around all the time because I was a military kid. So I like, if any place is home, it's definitely San Diego. It's the place I've lived the longest and have the most sort of connection with at this point.
It's such a transient city for you to say you've been here that long. I mean, you're practically natives.
Exactly, right?
Right.
And so when did you two meet?
We met 20 years ago.
It was a pretty long time ago.
Yeah. We've known each other for obviously a very long time. But we have not been a band for that long.
Right. Yeah. Do you want to tell the story of how we met?
Well, our bond is dark things. So, you know, we met at a Texas Chainsaw Massacre screening years ago in the middle of the night, and have just fermented a love of all things dark, from music to movies to fashion. I mean, obviously people listening can't see us, but we're both wearing pretty much solid black.
Yeah.
Nice. I'll post a picture for social media.
And I have a skull on my jacket, so
Excellent. I like it.
We're very on brand.
Yes. So was that in North County where you met?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that would. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've known each other forever. We've been friends for a long time. And Jeff has been a musician the entire time that I, you know, even at the age of 15, he was in a band. And
yeah, I was in a hardcore band in high school, and then in the early 2000s, I was in a band that was kind of a little more like dance punky.
Yeah, kind of more in the vein of like Q and Not You, or like...
Yeah, it was definitely in that vein of stuff. We were called Qnit. We were only around for a couple of years, but it was fun. I mean, we couldn't keep a drummer to save our lives. People kept
drummers.
Drummers would... Yeah, seriously. No, but people kept on like moving out of town, or... just like couldn't commit to anything. We must have gone through 3 or 4 drummers.
I think you guys had like 4 drummers
until finally we just had to say
in the course of like 3 years.
Oh, wow.
It was really short.
Yeah, it was tough because then they had to learn all of our songs over again.
Right.
And once the other founding member of that band left San Diego, it was time to say, all right, I think we're done, because then it's just like a whole new band, but with me, and it just felt like, yeah, I think it's run its course.
Sure, yeah. And then so when did Blood Ponies start?
I guess it's been about 3 years now since we really like started writing songs together.
I guess it was 2015. Our first show was we played a Halloween show in 2015.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Which was kind of an experiment in a way.
Yeah, it was all, it was at the Hideout, which is now Space, and they were doing a night of, since it's Halloween, it was all cover bands, so different bands were playing as other bands, like Boss Witch played as Nirvana, and we played as The Cure, which was an interesting experiment. Obviously, we're both huge Cure fans, but it's interesting to take a band that has anywhere between like 3 and 6 members and then try to adapt those songs for 2 people to play. So we had to be kind of strategic in what songs we picked.
We still picked some fairly ambitious songs, but it took a little planning to figure out, like, okay, if I can kind of combine the bass line and the lead to this song, and we can also do that. So it was tricky, but we made it work.
Yeah, it was kind of like a testing ground because we kind of just started, jamming out some stuff together in our practice space, and Jeff had this idea for a while, and I was kind of like, I like it. I just don't know if, because I came to playing like later. I didn't start as a teenager. I started later in life, and so my playing drums had been very much like for myself, and I wasn't really sure if it was something that I was going to be comfortable like getting up on stage and doing in front of other people. So the Halloween sort of like covers set was a good kind of like testing ground for me to be like, okay, is this something that I want to do and something that I'm going to be comfortable doing? Because it's a little less pressure when it's like not your own.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, it's a bunch of Cure songs. That's fine. I've been listening to those songs for decades. I can probably play them in my sleep. But Yeah, we had a great time, and I think after that, I've actually felt like really good that I wanted to, continue working on making it a more full-fledged thing where we actually went out and played shows and recorded something and, made it a real project.
And so it was called Blood Ponies at that time.
Yeah, I mean, we started with the name
had the
before
name.
we had any
Before
actual songs or anything.
What's up with the name? Like, where does that come from?
Kind of came to me one day.
I think it was just sort of like a phrase that sounded kind of fun. Like on one level, it's like it's ponies, so it's like kind of I don't know, kind of jaunty and fun. But then if you add blood to it, it makes it seem darker and more sinister. So I don't know.
There's just something like very disturbing about it.
That's what we liked about the combination. It was just like something that sounds very ordinary, but is also kind of unsettling.
It just seems like a good fit. Easy to remember.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely easy to pronounce and everything.
Yes,
That's always
absolutely.
important.
Especially, and I learned the hard way with my old band that like nobody knew how to say
terrible.
How did you spell that?
Cuneyt.
Oh no.
See, no, you can remember that.
Nobody could remember it. Nobody knew how to say it right. I don't even think we technically were saying it right because it was named after
Turkish,
a
right?
Turkish actor who was in this kind of ridiculous but sort of legendary bootleg version of Star Wars that was adapted for Turkish cinema, and so we didn't really know how to say his name, but we just liked the concept of this Turkish action hero being the name of our band. It didn't really work out well, but
Sure.
But we
That's hilarious.
But we went with it for a couple of years.
Nice. Cool. So, okay, so you played the Halloween show and then you decided, let's go for it. Let's make this a real band. Or
Yeah, and I think we had already written a couple songs.
Yeah, we had been working on some songs at that point. We had a couple sketched out, and and then the next show that we played was on the sidewalk in South Park during the walkabout, which it was just like a really odd, venue for our sound, because typically you think of more like
it's like
acoustic guitar and like families,
Yeah.
and it was the Christmas holiday walkabout too, so it was even more
It was a little odd because there were people who were having dinner that were kind of like looking over at us, like, what are these guys doing?
And playing outside on the sidewalk has its own special challenges of like the sidewalk's really uneven, and so like my drum kit's really unbalanced and things like that.
Where was it? Were you guys at least by Kindred or?
We were
right across the street. Yeah.
So that was okay, but it was super fun. And I think we only played like 5 songs or like 4 or 5 songs.
We played we played a few originals, and then we played one of the Cure covers. We didn't want to really keep doing that because it was just sort of a one-time thing. Although immediately after we played that Cure covers show, someone hit us up to ask us to do it again, and that feeling of panic set in. Like, is that what we are now? We're going to be
we're
the
just
Cure
a Cure cover band. And we're like, wait, no, we got to nip this in the bud. That's not what we're doing.
That's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
But so we played that show, and it was fun. People seemed to be into it. We were a little nervous that we'd be, kind of annoying people, but we had a pretty good response. And then our first show was at the Tower Bar in 2016.
Was that 2016? That's crazy.
Yeah, it was.
Wow. Yeah. So
it was like February of 2016.
Yeah. So a little over 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Oh, it just feels like that was yesterday.
Yeah. I know, right? So how did you get hooked up with the Walkabout, as a new band?
It was actually our hairstylist, because we both go to Goldline Salon in South Park, and they had just opened, hadn't they? Or it was their 1-year anniversary?
It was their 1-year anniversary.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
So since we've just been clients for so long, they had this idea that they were like, hey, we're going to have in conjunction with the Walkabout, we're going to have this 1-year anniversary party, and we think we need a band. So how about you guys play? We're like, well, why not?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So you just went for it.
Yeah,
nice.
It was fun. We had a good time.
We had a good time. It wasn't.
There was this little boy who was watching at the end. Told his mom, "When I grow up, I want to be a rock star." It was so cute. I was
awesome.
like, Jeff,
Blood
you're
Ponies change
changing
lives.
Yeah, changing people's futures. I'm sure his mom was like, oh boy, I'm in for a world of trouble.
Right.
That's a great career.
Yeah. The rock part is easy. It's the stardom that's hard.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. I'm still trying to figure that part out. and so you said that you write music together. Like it's like, how does that look like for? Because I mean, with a drummer and guitar, yeah.
Yeah.
It always starts with Jeff, pretty much.
I should probably describe a little bit about how our setup works since there's only two of us. And it's hard to sound really full with only two people. A lot of the time when you see two-person bands, I mean, there's a lot of ways to make it sound rich and dense, but it always runs the risk of sounding like something's missing. Mm-hmm. So I actually use 2 amps. So one of them is basically a bass line. I run an octave pedal out to a bass amp, and then all the leads are through a guitar amp. And so those are kind of both going simultaneously. So it sounds like there's a bass line
interesting
underneath the guitar. And I just try to write melodies that, for lack of a better word, in stereo, so that it kind of sounds like there are these two separate elements to it, so that the leads are higher up and then the kind of underlying bass notes sort of sound like their own bass line. So it took a little while to try to figure out how to do that and make it sound natural, because it's... I could just play power chords the whole time and it'll probably work, but it won't sound that interesting. Mm-hmm. So there's some trial and error with that. But usually it starts out with me kind of coming up with a cool riff or a cool melody, and then when it comes time to practice, I'll be like, hey, I came up with this thing and I'll show you, and then she'll come up with a rhythm, and then we'll kind of build it out from there. It usually just starts with one element, and then once we have that down, then we'll add like an intro or a bridge or what have you, and that's usually how it works. It usually comes together pretty quickly.
Yeah, it always starts with Jeff bringing me like he said, either a melody or maybe a verse worth of guitar that he's working on, and kind of saying like, how do you feel about this? What do you think of the sound so far? And then I'll usually kind of like sit with it a little, and then try to write some drum piece that complements it, and then I'll take it back to him and we'll kind of like play with that little chunk and go like, okay, do we feel like this is going in a direction that we both like, or is it just not working? Because we found pretty early in our process of writing together that like the best songs that we've written have just come together really fast. It's been more like when we've struggled and labored over something for like weeks or sometimes even months, and we still can't finish it, and we're still just like not going somewhere, that like after doing that a few times we realize like that's not our rhythm. Like if we can't get it out naturally without like forcing it, then there's a reason for that. So we've gotten into this pretty good system of like, if when we take our two pieces and bring them together and it doesn't like there's this really amazing like synergy that happens when like he's come up with something, I've come up with something, and then we start playing them, and then we're able to just kind of like almost like improvise from there and just like keep going and come up with more pieces as we're playing. That is a really great feeling, and like that's when we know we've got something that's working. It's more when we get to this point where like, okay, well now what do we do with it? And we just kind of stare at each other and we're like, I don't know where it's going.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of good examples for both extremes. There's one song that I had this riff that I really liked, and I had been playing it, and Candice was like, okay, yeah, all right. I mean, I think maybe we could do something with that, and we just kind of kept working on it, and it sounded fine, but it just didn't feel right. And the longer we worked on it, like the more frustrated we got, until eventually I think you just got up and said, I need to just walk away from this. Because we were just kind of beating it into the ground, and we didn't like it any better. And
I mean, you spend months laboring over this thing, and then you're just like, and I still don't like it, so that's not a good sign.
You can't force it. I think if even if there's you could probably salvage an element of it and work it into something else, but I think when you try to turn it into something that it isn't, that's when you have a problem. But there's another song that we're in the middle of writing an album, and we just kind of had this kind of groove that we came up with, and so the other day we hadn't really spent a lot of time on this one sort of specific sketch, and the other day we just kind of like let a loop go and just started kind of playing some stuff on top of it, and it just came together almost like magically. Like we didn't even have to talk about it or discuss it. It just kind of happened, and we just kind of looked at each other afterwards and said, "That was amazing.
Yeah, that was the song.
That was awesome. Like that's it right there."
The problem is, I feel like I have a really terrible memory, so I'm always like, okay, we got to record this before I forget what I played. Like I'm not gonna remember how I played that.
Yeah.
So we'll do that a lot, where we'll just like bust out someone's phone and just like record it really quick, so
some
that
quickie demos.
You know, 2 days later when I sit back down, I'm like, shit, what was I playing in that bridge that sounded really cool yesterday?
Yeah, very cool. I love when that magic happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good feeling.
For sure, yeah.
So let's take a quick break and listen to one of the tracks that you sent me. You sent me some really cool songs. So let's listen to Let Me In.
Sure.
We're back. That's a really cool track. And you guys have a music video for that one.
We
right?
do.
We
yeah.
do. Yeah.
It's like one of the first songs we wrote together, and it's still one of my favorites.
I think that song was probably the moment when we realized that we had kind of had something cool.
Yeah.
And that we felt really good about the direction of the band.
Yeah. I just love playing that song. It's just really fun to play.
Yeah, super fun song. So what was that, making that video like?
That was pretty crazy. We did it really fast.
We did it in one weekend, and we had reached out to some kind of friends of friends who had made. They did some videos for the band Tropical Popsicle. And
I don't know that band, but I love that name.
Yeah, they're not really active anymore, but they were for a while.
Yeah, they've basically gone into retirement.
Yeah.
But, well, a couple of the members are in the band The Cabs right now, and I think the other two aren't really doing anything. One of them just left San Diego, but
and anyhow, they were friends with the guys in that band and had been fans, and they had a video. For one of their songs called, I think it was the Ghost Beacons video, right?
Ghost Beacons.
Yeah. And I just remember talking to them and I was like, hey, I really love the video. We are looking to do a video soon. Who did you use? And they had a couple of friends who were originally from San Diego that live in LA now, working in TV and
I think they work for Comedy
Central or
now.
something. Yeah. But they just, still like making music videos sort of as like
they kind of do it for fun.
Yeah, just for fun, which was amazing. And so,
just because they like music and they like the medium, I think.
Yeah, so we sent them the track and we're like, hey, our friends recommended we reach out to you. And they were basically like, yeah, we would love to work with you guys. Just, if you just cover the costs of our like productions, equipment rentals and things like that, we'll make it for you. So, we did most of the concepting and everything over emails, and then they came down to San Diego for the weekend and we shot part of it at our house with a green screen background, and then part at our friend Britt, who's actually the female star in
she's the final girl in the video.
She's that's her house actually, so we shot with her over basically one day, and they put it all together for us, and it was so much fun to work on. And, I'm sure even if you're not familiar with it was kind of based around the film Repulsion, like the concept for the video. Oh. But I mean, even if you're not like super familiar with that particular film, I think you kind of just get a horror movie sense from it in general, which is, I think as much as like other bands inspire us, horror movies inspire us a lot too. So.
Horror movies and like weird stories of like either true crime or like unexplained phenomena.
Yeah.
Things
Jeff
like that.
is a big fan of stories that have no explanation. Like that's
yeah.
I mean, I think we both are, but like you in particular really gravitate to stories that don't have an explanation.
I mean, I kind of tend to go down some internet rabbit holes about like weird mysteries and things like that. Yeah.
Does that come out in the lyrics?
Yes, it happens a lot. Well, some of them aren't mysteries per se. Actually, Let Me In is based on kind of a real story of somebody who disappeared, and just the details of the story were kind of fascinating to me, and so I just kind of.
What happened? Do you remember?
Well, I can't remember the name of the person who disappeared, but basically, she crashed her car. This was somewhere in New England, New Hampshire, or Vermont, or something like that, and she went to like knock on somebody's door for help because she'd gotten into this accident, and then like he said he'd go back in to call 911 or something, and then when he came back out, she was gone, and it was snowing, and like she probably just wandered off into the elements and. In all likelihood, probably froze to death or something like that. But It's just one of those things where, like, the deeper you go into it, there's these weird little details where you kind of think, well, that's weird. That's suspicious.
And they never found her?
No.
Like,
No.
they never found her body or anything?
No trace of her. I mean, it could be one of those things where animals got to her or something like that. I don't think that's super uncommon in that sort of situation. But there are other songs where
I'm just thinking, because this is a topic or an inspiration of another song. Did she fake her own death? Maybe that's what
it's
she was
possible.
doing.
Some people believe that that's what she did, and that.
So Jeff has another song that he, like, lyrically, it was I think inspired around the idea of people faking their own deaths, right?
Yeah. Well, are you familiar with Lore podcast?
No.
It's one of our favorites. It's this podcast basically about kind of these weird myths. It's sort of like the true life stories behind popular, like, folklore, but it's always kind of creepy stuff. Like, some of it is about, like, how vampires came into popular belief or things like that. This was a story about H.H. Holmes, who was one of the most prolific early serial killers of the 20th century. But he actually was hired by somebody to produce a corpse for insurance fraud. So it's such a outlandish story and so grotesque, but it was just sort of like, I'll kill somebody for you so you can fake your own death and collect the money. And, like,
well, it was weird. I think at the time we were writing this, like, we both ended up in this weird, like, internet podcast reading about, like, people faking their own deaths. And so I got really fascinated by something that I learned about how, like, it seems like men fake their own deaths way more frequently than women do. And there's sort of, like, two reasons why that could be, or maybe it's probably both, is, like, one, it's just, women, when confronted with something challenging, rather than thinking, like, how can I trick the world so that I can get out of this challenging situation, they just face it.
Or they're just better at it.
That's the other possibility, is that men get caught more. So, like, that's how we know that more men fake their own deaths than women. So it could be that women are doing it just as much, but they're better at it. So just now when you were like, well, they never found her body, I'm like, what if she faked her own death?
She was a college student, though, so I'm not sure that.
That's a pretty sophisticated level of crime for someone of that age.
My guess is it was probably she kind of succumbed to the elements, but you never know.
Yeah.
I'm also, that's the other thing, as much as I love these kind of weird rabbit hole mysteries, I'm also kind of a realist. Like, I don't, Sasquatch is probably a bear, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a weird contradiction, but I still super fascinated by them.
Sure. So what is it about, like, dark, grotesque things that draws you together and interests you?
I think it's like, I think we all have, this is going to sound really, I don't know, heavy and possibly pretentious, likely pretentious. Like, I think we all, like, if we're being real with ourselves, right? We all have really dark feelings. And I think you can either, like, suppress them and hide them and, like, try to be like, yay, everything's so good and everything's so happy. Or you can channel those feelings into a positive and productive direction, right? Like, that's the way I look at it. So, like, there are always these things that come up about, like, I mean, if you look at, like, the satanic panic of the 80s and, when people were like, oh, does listening to, Judas Priest or Alice Cooper make people want to, join cults and this and that and whatever. Like, I think it's, for, like, the way Jeff and I see it, it's like the opposite. It's like, if you can address what within you is dark and hurting and maybe a little disturbed and put it out through art, it addresses something, like, really primal within you in a way that's, like, healthy and in a way that's healing. And that's sort of, like, what I talk about this too on, like, a religious level. Like, I'm an atheist. I don't believe that anything is going to happen to me after I die other than my bones will decompose and, so that also is like, there's a little bit of like a reconciling with the finality of life and like what it means, and understanding that like there is an end and there is dark and there are all of these things. It helps. It's like, that gives me a clarity around it and addressing it rather than being afraid of it. That was a lot of answer. Jeff might feel differently.
I agree with everything that Candice said, but I have another addition to that, which is that on an aesthetic level, I find that I get a certain kind of nourishment of sorts from dark art. And there's a lot of bad dark art, so it's not a blanket thing.
Yeah.
But I know that when I listen to sometimes like really abstract drone music that's kind of intense and kind of heavy, one person can listen to it and hear something that's kind of really harsh or ugly, but I can listen to it and hear something kind of spiritual and meditative. And I find that the more I do listen to music that has this kind of dark or abrasive element to it, I get something more out of it. And I don't know if it's just because I'm always challenging myself to seek out things that are a little kind of outside the mainstream or kind of beyond things that are maybe more conventionally accessible. I don't know. There's just something that I get out of it that I don't know, kind of feeds this craving I have for art that challenges me. And
yeah, I think the notion of something that challenges you when you listen to it is really important to both of us. We tend to, just in the bands that we like and that we seek out and spend time with, like, we want to be challenged. We want to have something that maybe, every time you listen to it, you're hearing something a little different. You're interpreting it in your own way. You're getting something beyond just, well, isn't that pretty? There's
or catchy or fun. Not that we don't like fun or catchy music.
Yeah, and to people who do, like, that's totally fine. Like, and we are very aware of the fact that, like, our style of music is not for everyone. And we're not going to kid ourselves into believing that, like, we're going to become, like, pop sensations, because it's just, like, we know we're writing music that not everyone is going to be into. And that's fine. But to a certain group of people, I think it will resonate. And even when we have just, like, connected with, people at shows who we've never met before, who seem to, kind of feel what we're playing. Like, I want to be able to make music for people like that, who feel like they don't have other bands that speak to them on that level necessarily, or just not as many.
Sure. So, like, when people get you, it's like they really get you.
Yeah, I think
right.
so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so, like, who are some of your, like, influences, like the bands that you were talking about that, like, you feel like challenge you? And
I mean, on a
well, I mean, there's we're influenced by so many different things. I mean, when we started out, the first song that we ever wrote sounded kind of almost exactly like a Bauhaus song.
I mean, it's definitely if you're looking at, like, older bands, for sure, like Bauhaus, The Birthday Party, Joy Division, those have definitely been, The Cure.
Yeah.
Really, like, foundational in the kind of sound that we like and that we want to certainly not copy, but just sort of, like, embody in that same sphere. But there have been a lot more new bands too, like the band Algiers, which we played a show with them last year.
That was a super fun show.
Been huge fans of their work, because, again, it is so challenging. It's so hard to, like, pigeonhole it into a genre, and it touches so many different layers and it's very, like, it's just very dense and interesting. And that is something that we always sort of, like, want to, that's just what we like when we listen to music.
Right.
Sure.
There's a lot of contemporary bands that we really like Proto Martyr, Idols,
Savages.
Savages.
A huge Savages fan.
Yeah.
Silent, who are
Silent from Mexicali. Fantastic.
We played a show with them too, and that was really fun. But we also kind of get inspired by, maybe things that don't come out so blatantly in our music sometimes. There's one song that I wrote kind of back. It was like 2 years ago, where I kind of took some inspiration from Funkadelic.
Wait, I don't even know this. What song are you referring to?
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Finished.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that.
I borrowed a couple phrases from Maggot Brain, I'll admit to it.
Nice.
But,
I feel like every guitar player has at some point.
Of course. And PJ Harvey is also another really big one. Nick Cave. But I also listen to, kind of, as I was saying, like kind of more abstract stuff. Like Prurient is an artist that I really like. He's a guy who's been, for probably about 20 years, he's been around for a long time. He's been making kind of noise and drone and industrial stuff. And we've been kind of playing with more loops and synthesizer stuff lately. And so that's kind of been playing into kind of how I think about the overall kind of texture of our sound, kind of even more than just the melody or the arrangement, and just sort of like this, just how to kind of blanket the space that our music occupies. So stuff like that, or Pharmacon, who's another kind of industrial artist that does kind of intense, like really sort of primal stuff. And when I hear that, I don't necessarily think like, I want our music to sound like that.
I mean, and no one's ever going to like confuse us with being an industrial band, but but there's definitely an element of just sort of like Jeff's saying, like the feeling and the mood of industrial music that we want to kind of channel with our own stuff. So yeah, what we're working on for the new album, we are experimenting with more like he said, like drones and loops and things like that to try to add an additional layer.
So how are you doing that while playing guitar?
So we kind of have to. I can't do both at the same time unless I grew a couple more arms.
Well, we're even like trying. I mean, we have ideas for like how it would get recorded, but then like how it would get played live, so it would be another level. So
and vice versa, actually, because I think that the way we would play it live might present a challenge for how to record it as well, because for recording you obviously want it to sound as clean as possible, whereas like if it's kind of messy live, it's not that big of a deal in a way, but we're using loops in kind of a textural way so that it's not as well. There's one song where it's kind of rhythmic and it's kind of like
we have a Roland Juno 106 that we're using for most of these pieces, and then basically like Jeff is just recording either like sort of an ambient like abstract drone that he creates on the keyboard and then running it through a loop pedal, or some of them have a little bit more of a like specific melody that we're like I'll tap it out on like my floor tom or something while he does the loop, and then we'll play over that loop. So it's definitely adding a layer of like complication to everything. And even when we just like try to rehearse things too, it's like, okay, we lost the loop somewhere in the process. So, we have to get a little like tighter. And
that's kind of why we're trying not to write songs that are so dependent on following the loop. Because
more just like a droney kind of
thing. Yeah. I mean, which is to say that we're still doing that a couple times, but it's just a matter of making sure that if she can hear the loop, that's the most important thing, because then once the drums and the bass line or whatever it is are locked in, then
he can follow on top of that, and that's a little easier. So it's like as long as I can, and we're getting a little better at it, just by nature of working on it more. As long as I can hear the loop, then I can play along to the loop, and then Jeff can play on top of me in a sort of like cascading way.
But I think we're also just kind of reaching a point where we're comfortable just kind of experimenting with things just to kind of see what happens, because we as I mentioned earlier, there are limits to what we can do since there are only two of us. But I think we've done a pretty good job of stretching them pretty far. But so we're like, okay, well, let's see what happens if we add something to it. And we've really been happy with the results so far. So I think that there's a lot of kind of terrain to continue to be explored.
Yeah, very cool. Well, let's take another quick break and
Sure.
listen to the other track you sent me. This one is called The Greater Good.
I see the red in their eyes. I see the whites of their teeth. I see the blue in their veins. I see them coming toward me. This is what we want. This is what we want. They want me tied and smothered. They want me tarred and feathered. They want me drawn and quartered. They want this over soon. This is what we want. This is what we want. In our community, there's room for everyone. We all decide together. We're all in this together. In our community, there's room for everyone. Don't turn against us, please. It's what we want.
And we're back. A little shorter than you remembered.
We actually, most of our songs are pretty short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But tell me about that track.
That's our most political track.
That is
Yeah.
kind of our most
Yeah.
political track. I on a literal level, I wrote it from the perspective of basically being chased by an angry mob. But at the time,
It was during the 2016 election.
it was
right.
yeah, it was shortly after Trump got the nomination for the Republican candidate for president, and that kind of made me panic a little, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you write a lot of political music, or did that just come out?
I have been more lately.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's actually a theme that's come up in a few podcasts.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
saying I didn't used to write political music, but now
Well,
it's just coming out.
I think it would happen regardless, because there's injustices, and there's
Yeah.
things that are really awful that are happening in the world, and I think that would probably come out one way or another, but I think that there's actually like a pretty blatant face that you can put to a lot of it right now. But yeah, I was just kind of seeing kind of the weird, really unsettling things that were happening at Trump rallies, and it just kind of gave me this really gross feeling like I don't think we're heading in the right direction right now. And so I just kind of wrote this, this song from kind of the perspective of like our worst instincts taking over and kind of killing us in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, as much as it's not necessarily, I don't even want to say like, oh, it's not our intention to be a political band, because like, fuck that, we're going to be a political band if we want to be a political
Right.
band. But like,
We're not like gonna say that we're not, because we are, and we're gonna talk about if something's wrong and if something's
like we played, we had our EP release on it was the night before Trump's inauguration, and like we were very, very obvious in having like anti-Trump, propaganda at the show. I mean, we were like our friend Ryan was selling his book that was called Donald Trump is a Loser. And
the book was basically just the phrase Donald Trump is a loser like thousands of times.
yeah, just like 300 pages of Donald Trump is a loser. And
But
we
it
had like
was-
a Trump pinata. And I mean, it was, you know, like we're pretty obvious and do not hide behind who we are in terms of political points of view. But like, you know, we both get super frustrated when we see people being like, oh, leave politics out of, you know, art or television or sports or whatever. Because, like, you know, everything is politics. Like, to pretend like you can ignore politics is to come from a place of extreme privilege, because the decisions that are made by politicians across the country affect people's lives on the most basic level. So for anyone to sit back and be like, well, I'm not going to be political, that means that your life is so comfortable that it's not being affected by these decisions and that you have some autonomy in your life. And there are so many people who don't, that like to be that complacent, just like, we just can't be like that.
And it's not even necessarily just speaking about like people running for office, because I think that that's such a, I mean, obviously that's a part of politics, but it's more that like there are decisions being made every day that affect people's lives that maybe they don't realize or don't think about, and affect people's lives that maybe you don't know these people, but like it can be really harmful. You know, I'm just thinking about like everything that's happening with ICE right now.
Yeah.
You know, people that are, what was it, 1,500?
1,500 kids that they
that-
like can't even account for, that were taken into custody by Border Patrol. Like it just those sorts of things that like
They just get lost in the system, and it's just really awful, because it's like these are people's lives, you know.
Yeah.
Like it, you know.
I mean, we're not going to be nearly, you know, so self-important as to think that like anything that we write is going to make people, is going to, you know, change the system. But like,
I think
you just do what you can in your own individual way.
it's not even so much. Well, I mean, I it'd be great if somebody heard our song and would be like, yeah, you know what? This is fucked up. But I don't think that's really how people are going to see it. But that being said, for people like us who are like, have, you know, like small panic attacks reading the news every day, I think it's good to have this outlet where we can talk about these things that are frustrating us, which isn't to say that we're powerless in any way. I mean, we vote, we give to organizations that do good work.
We call our Congress.
People
regularly.
And we're actually, you know, we live in a district that's where we're lucky that
we have elected representatives that actually, for the most part, like do
what
vote
we'd
the way
like
we
them
would.
to do. But there's also another danger in that, and it's like, do we become complacent?
Well, yeah,
because
then
it's
you
like,
get complacent again.
yeah.
And you can see this is like a running theme with us, is like
Sure.
complacency is evil.
Yeah.
But you know, I just think that it's art is always going to be political in one way or another. If
Yeah.
you choose not to engage with what's happening in the world, that in
That
itself,
in itself
is a
is a
statement.
political statement,
Yeah.
you know?
It's
So
true.
yeah, to pretend like there's no politics in what you do as an artist is just super disingenuous.
And you know, we obviously don't have all the answers or anything, but I think we are asking questions, and that's an important thing to do. I mean, the questions are just as important as the answers.
Sure. Yeah. I'm also hearing from you a common theme of using music as an outlet.
Yeah,
for,
exactly.
Yeah.
For
It's-
whatever you're processing or your whatever's going on.
Yeah, I think it's just such a cathartic tool for humans. And again, like there's something just really primal, and I'll, you know, sound like a drum nerd and talking about like
yeah.
rhythms and heartbeats and like how it's just like so much a part of who we are. But yeah, I think everyone on some level like feels like a spiritual connection to music. I mean, it's going to be a different genre, a different style, whatever, but most people can find something in music that like really speaks to them on a very sort of like deep level that they can't quite express.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people all over the world throughout history
Yeah,
have made music.
doesn't
It's
matter.
amazing.
Yeah, who you are, where you come from, race, gender, whatever. Like everyone connects to music in some way.
And it's such a funny thing because music is such an ephemeral art form, because you kind of hear it and then it just kind of disappears and it's gone. And it's, I mean, you can listen to it again, but it's not like something tangible or something that you can kind of, just have right in front of you that you can, engage with on a more material level. So it's a weird thing, but it speaks to, as Candice was saying, it speaks to people on a primal level, and it's kind of this weird, it's like a secret code or something, that it kind of unlocks these kind of deep emotional recesses within people, and that's kind of something that I find really, really fascinating about it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like what you said, because it asks for time from the audience in a way that other pieces of art don't.
Yeah, for sure. We not too long ago, we were having a conversation with a guy who plays in a ska band in London, and he was talking about like he played a show where like a bunch of his family was there, or maybe it was even like a family event that he was playing.
It might have been, yeah.
And afterwards, he was talking to like an uncle or something, and he was like, "So, Uncle so and so, what did you think of our set?" And the uncle's reply was like, "Well, I just don't really like music." And, and we were
so
all
weird.
like so
Yeah.
baffled by
That
this,
is
like,
strange.
like, I mean, I get saying like I don't like this style of music, like not, but I don't like music. That's like saying I don't like colors,
or I don't
like
like food.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I just can't understand that. It's so broad. It's such a
Wow.
big thing.
And
So strange.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we talk about how we like dark music, we like dark arts, we like dark aesthetics, but music to me, regardless of intent or what kind of the content of the music is such a joyful thing for me that I almost get kind of irritated if I go too long without listening to music. Like something's wrong if I haven't been listening to music. I talk about listening to podcasts or whatever, but I can't. Some people binge on podcasts, and I listen to a little bit at a time, but I always have to be listening to music at some point.
Yeah, same thing happens to me. And I've been driving too long just on podcasts. Need to go back to music. Yeah. So if people want to find your music or find you guys, do you have any shows coming up?
Not at the moment, because we're kind of concentrating our time right now on finishing up all the songs that we're planning on recording. So we're probably not going to get back to playing shows for a couple months.
Yeah, we're consciously trying to like not play some live shows right now because we really need to focus in on songwriting. But you can find our EP online, so you can find that at our Bandcamp page, which is bandcamp.
No.
Right, Blood Ponies.
Blood. Is there a hyphen?
There's a hyphen.
Yeah.
Blood-ponies.bandcamp.com. That was it. I was thinking for some reason it was the other way around.
And we're also on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And
do you get any traction on Twitter? I have Twitter. I don't know what to do with it.
Not so much for the band. No, I feel like
it's like slowly growing. But
I feel like Twitter is like the least engaging platform for bands.
For sure.
Our Instagram, I think, is probably
our Instagram gets the most.
Yeah.
We have the most followers, and it lends itself well to, I guess, just kind of getting the word out. Especially because you can post like short videos and things.
Yeah, I think that's probably why.
Yeah, like one of our last posts was a short teaser of one of the new songs that we're working on. So
very cool. And you guys have a great aesthetic, so that's great for Instagram too.
Thank you.
We do sometimes post like, we try to be really, curated in what we put out for the band, but at the same time, like Jeff and I are just also kind of dorks, and we'll like post pictures of the cat in our rehearsal space, and like random
we
things.
do have a black cat, so it works.
Of course you do.
Yeah, of course we do.
All right, well, thanks guys for coming to the studio.
Absolutely, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks again for listening to episode number 14 of the Sunshine Sound podcast. You can always find older episodes at sunshinesoundcenter.org, plus some other fun stuff about Sunshine Sound Center. We are also on all the socials on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and we'll use those pages to not only give you updates on SSC, but also to give you some updates on what the artists who come on this show are up to. And you can also just kind of see what's going on in the San Diego music scene. That's what we're all about. So if you want to get in contact with me, have any suggestions for other guests, any questions, any comments, you can contact me at Christine with the C at sunshinesoundcenter.org. And thank you to Tommy Bobcat for helping with the audio engineering and all that good stuff. And I will talk to you again soon. Have a good one.